Hey everybody, it's Scott Stoltz, and I am about to get started recording another podcast with Lawrence Stevenson. So we're going live, and if you want, join us, hang out, get a feel for some of what we're going to talk about today with Lawrence from Boston, and say hello.
How you guys doing?
I can't wait to get you introduced to everybody.
Yeah, we're going to share this real quick.
Please do. So thanks for hanging tight through, if you're watching this recorded later, as we get set up here, and I'm going to hit record on this in just a second when you are ready. But podcast recording coming live. Oh, great. We can already see you sharing. So as always, and today joining us on our Create Your Great podcast recording session with Lawrence Stevenson, we're going to talk a little bit about how Lawrence is working very hard these days on inspiring inclusion and so diversity, inclusion, and what's another catchword we can use to get our audience drawn into what we're going to talk about today?
Just building bridges between communities.
I like it.
And really getting individuals and organizations to really live their best lives and potential.
All right, so there you have it. And hang tight, and let's get rocking and rolling with our podcast recording. And we are off. Okay. So Lawrence, it's great to have you again. Good to see you. This is our third time together in the last month or two.
Right.
And how's your New Year been going?
My New Year's been great. I set some New Year's goals on kind of how I wanted to be in the world. And some of those goals are going swimmingly, others are not going so well. But every day is a new day to choose and put my best foot forward.
Absolutely. Yep. Every day is different, brings different challenges and other things to look forward to. I know it's this January's flying by.
Yeah.
We're already almost 1 month into 2018.
Right.
Did you have any set? Let's start short term, and we're going to get into all about what you do and some of your work. And you know, when we met, I was really drawn and inspired. We met kind of in an interesting way. Maybe we'll tell that story later.
For sure.
But I was just really intrigued by some of the work that you were doing and the level-headed perspective that you brought to it. So we'll get into all that. But did you have any short-term January 2018 goals that you wanted to get started on for the new year?
Yeah. So one of the goals I had in short term for January was just to get myself out there and use social media more as a way to, connect with the people I'm trying to reach. And something I'm working on is letting myself be seen and being known by the people I'm trying to influence. So I feel like I've done well with that. Been posting more, and I'm here with you today. So this is a big step towards that. Thanks
for being. And listen, do me a favor. If you're on the Facebook Live, feel free to chime in if you're having any trouble hearing us. We're in a pretty big room. You can see it's nice, rainy downtown Boston outside behind us, but just want to make sure you're all hearing us okay too. So, you talk about social media, and is it like a shift or a change for you that using it more, and do you look at it because for me, I know that I wasn't a big social media user, somewhat of an observer, but now I know I leverage it a lot for some of my work.
Yeah.
So where does it fit in with you? Is it something that you said, I'm going to leverage social media more to accomplish my mission? How's it going for you?
Well, personally, I was never really a big social media person. I really value like face-to-face connection a lot. So I felt like social media really created like kind of a gap between me and the people I was trying to connect with. Originally it was like kind of my mindset, but we have to adapt and think about ways that we are connecting with people.
Mm-hmm.
So social media is a great way to connect with more people and really reach my audience. I'm trying to reach, especially those that I would never talk to in person. I don't have the opportunity to talk to in person to reach those people.
Well, you got a couple of audience members right now on Facebook Live as we record your Create Your Great podcast. And Alex and Carvin, if you all are listening, if you're working and this is on in the background, great, thanks. Alex, how's it going? We have to get together again soon. And Carvin, if you haven't met him yet, Carvin does work with Kit and Boston Speaks. You will probably meet him soon if you haven't already.
You know what? Hey Carvin, I have met Carvin at actually his studio, his
Good.
radio show.
So let's talk a little bit about some of your work. And I'll tee this up a little bit with you, but when I met you, and just first of all, I was drawn in just to the authentic way in which, and I know we use that word a lot, but I sensed from you a want and a drive and a willingness to help people in the community. And there's a lot going on these days, not just in the connection economy, but socially.
Right.
Socially. So can you tell our audience, are you driven? Is it part work and social issues, or is it more one over the other? Like where's your impetus for this? Where's it coming from?
Right. Well, apart from me, when I set goals, it's even more important for me to set goals is setting a vision for how I want to be in the world. And I like to use this vision for myself of how I want to be in the world, like influence my work I'm doing, how I am socially. So for me, like my mission in the world is just to inspire others to live their best life and really put their best foot forward every day and include all of themselves in every space they go into, right? Understand that it all serves and we have a place for every piece of ourselves and our identities to shine in whatever sphere we're operating in.
What did you feel a need over, and I'm going to bring this up, you're what, 23, 24 years old?
Yeah.
So it's only relevant in the fact that I think you just have such a, you're wise beyond your years kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like your perspective really impressed me. Where did some of this perspective of wanting to help people realize their potential, bring up topics like inclusion, where does this come from? Is it a family thing, the way you were raised? What helped you get into this arena?
Right. Well, I was raised actually not far from here, right, in the South End, and I think that in my community, something I realized is there are so many people I was raised with such this raw skill and talent in how they live their life, like just putting their best foot forward, right? And then I had the opportunity to be a part of the MECO program where I was bused to a suburban community. And I was asked to leave some of my social identity, definitely as my identity as a black man in my community. And I couldn't always include those parts of myself when I went in that space. So I realized that also being out there, that there's some great skills that come from my community. For example, how to political skill, like politicking, right? Like how to be able to use that to mobilize that to reach my goals. And not everyone in my community was doing that. So I really realized this opportunity for people to really marry like the education we get and these raw skills we're building and kind of bridge those together and bridge all the pieces of ourselves together.
What did you mean when you said you were asked, or was it like an unwritten assumption that you were bused to another community? This was for school?
Right, this is for school, yeah.
And what did you mean when you said you were asked to leave your identity back? And we grew up in Roxbury?
I grew up in the South End.
South End, you said that. Okay, so what did you mean you had to leave your identity behind?
Yeah, well, like I was told that there's, and this wasn't like asked like, like you're asking me questions right now. It's more, an expectations, right? The expectation was that I assimilate to the community in which I was going into, instead of being multicultural, right? In a culture of inclusion and pluralism, where I can bring my full identity and the way I dress, the way I carry myself. I felt like the expectation was that I leave those cultural parts of myself at home and assimilate to the community I was in.
Were there a lot of kids from your neighborhood and part of town who were bused out to this particular school?
There was just like a handful of us. There was in the program I was in. There was maybe I think I graduated with maybe 400 people, and about 15 of us were MECO students. So 15 of us were from Boston.
Could you, I've never heard of that program.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say a MECO?
MECO.
MECO?
MECO. Yeah.
MECO.
Yeah.
All right, and the purpose of that is to give opportunity to go to or take part in other schools. What's the
right? That's one part of the mission. Another part of the mission is to create diversity and inclusion in these communities, like Lincoln and like Sudbury, like Wayland, Scituate, just to bring culture to these communities. So a realization I had was, the importance of that being the mission, to create assimilation. To create inclusion in these communities,
mm-hmm.
and it not being done in an authentic way.
Yeah, and I don't know a lot about those kind of programs, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it as I listen to you.
Yeah.
And Carvin, thanks for your comment and question. We'll definitely get to that in a minute. I'll help tee that up. But before we do, so it sounds like the intent's good,
Mm-hmm.
but did it create anything that was a little bit forced or hard to, like, what if you just decided, I'm not saying you did or didn't do this, but what if you decided, I'm going to be my true self.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to dress like, talk like, act like, be who I am, regardless of where I go. Would that have been a good thing, a not so good thing? Like, how did that play out? Or maybe you saw that with other kids in the program.
Right. I can speak to this like I'll just speak to this not just as a student, but just as a male of color in general. When we bring our marginal identity to spaces that are not by nature multicultural, by not like intending to be pluralistic, oftentimes what happens is like we're excluded, right? Mm-hmm. We're told that we receive social ostracism for highlighting our culture, and in some situations, people have completely disadvantaged and have all their privilege taken away when they do decide to be pluralistic and bring the full parts of themselves. But I think that by doing so authentically anyway, and even if it creates some type of chaos in the environment, I think that that's what these environments need. I think environments need pluralism. They need people to bring full parts of themselves, because that's how, we create new culture and improve our diversity of thought.
Yeah, I went to a Catholic school, and there was plenty of diversity. And I always say that, and I grew up in Southern Connecticut, and just because I didn't go to the public school in my town, and I went to a Catholic school, there were kids from all the surrounding towns. Right. And even though as I got older and into high school, I changed. I ended up wanting to go to public school. Mm-hmm. But I still to this day, in fact, I said it a few months ago to somebody I was talking to, that I actually am grateful for my grammar school mm-hmm. schooling situation, because it opened me up to, just people from, and I don't even really necessarily, me personally, I don't really necessarily look at ethnic background or color of skin per se. Mm-hmm. I'm more talking about, for me, it helped just kids and people from different backgrounds, family types. Right. We weren't all from the exact same neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So, I see a lot of good in that. I see a lot of good, like blending people together. In some ways, there should be more of that, don't you think?
I think there should be so much more of it, and I don't know, usually even call it like blending it together, because like I think that we're used to this idea of like a melting pot, right? Where we're bringing our like identity, but it's blended, and we don't get the substance of identity and culture. Where I like to use a fruit salad, where everyone has their individual identity, and also there's a certain synergy to these different how these different identities come together.
Right.
Right. So
we had a couple comments a couple minutes ago about, and hi Jillian, thanks for joining. And Jillian's mentioning, similar to what I just did, about how important it is for us to, get exposure and learn about others. And I think Carvin, and if I'm off on this, please feel free to correct me, was asking about like some of the risks of, of when you ask people to not be their true selves, like the dangers we run into when you do that. And it sounds like you've experienced some of this like every step of the way in your life.
Yeah.
You and I talked a little bit last time we met. We talked a little bit about some of that in an informal, just one-on-one conversation. But what is your response to that? Like, what are the dangers when we're asking people to try and fit in and not be who they really are?
Yeah. So the danger of it, one is like we really limit for the organization. I'll start with, right. It's really detrimental because we limit our diversity of thought, right? If we're asking people just to bring the parts of themselves that we know and that we see and that we're used to, right? Our perspective as an organization is going to be here, where instead if you ask people to bring their full selves and you have everybody around the people of difference around the table making decisions, then our diversity thought is now here. Right, we have so much more as an organization we're able to see and able to tackle. So when we are asking people to leave their cultural identities or sexual identities at home, we don't get to have this. We only have this, right? And then for the individual, it's the same thing, right? Like when we don't bring our full selves, like we don't get to have the flavor and the juices of our whole perspective. And I think also there's a certain trauma that lives within us when we are asked to leave some of our identity at home and or within ourselves and not able to express that, right? If we have parts of ourselves I feel like we're not able to express, and I talk about this in some of the work that I do, it creates so much tension. We need to develop. We need to get these parts of ourselves out and express them.
Yeah, I would imagine that's very important. What are some? And I truly mean that. We have to be able to do that. Right. It goes against everything that we're wired as people to do. So, what are some healthy ways? This is a great conversation. This is a new shift for me. Yeah. Before we get more into your work, which I definitely want to share with our audience, audio and visual. What are some healthy ways in which we can allow and help and enable and encourage people to express who they are? And I'm going to chime in and set up a little bit more. I think having the ability to speak and share on an occasional group gathering, a protest, that has its purpose, to be able to express. But my question for you now is more, how can people do it on a day-to-day basis? How can we live our lives? Because that's what I want to help bring to people through Create Your Great and creating our fulfillment is, how can we build habits and systems into our lives on a daily basis that help us realize all that and create that fulfillment? So what do you say with some people that you work with now? Like, what are things that people can regularly do to express themselves and not feel restrained or held back?
Right. One, I think it starts with understanding that, we matter, right? Like, I feel like often we look for permission to be able to express certain things, certain parts of ourselves, but we are given permission to be our full selves when we're born into this planet. So first, honoring that, right? Like, there's beauty in grace and all this greatness in who we are as full people. We are a universe. So first, celebrating that, right? Mm-hmm. Celebrating all these different parts of ourselves, and also giving us going in spaces where we're able to do this, right? Like when we go into work, having conversations about what's going on in our community, having conversations about what's going on in our homes, what foods we eat, what holidays we celebrate. I feel like oftentimes we're told to not talk about a lot of these things, but that's so important to share who we are, right? Oftentimes a certain realization I've had recently is that it's frustrating when we feel like other people don't see us, right? But how are people supposed to see us if we don't show them who we are? And if we don't show them these different parts of ourselves, we're gonna feel unseen, right? Because we are, right? So I feel like that, it's really important in having the intention to bring ourselves fully.
Do you work? I love that. That really hit home. Being able to, because I talk a lot about accountability, personal accountability, and owning, and there are a lot of circumstances that happen in life that are really challenging to all of us, and some more than others, and because of at times where you're born and where you come from.
Mm-hmm.
But I always, we talk a lot about, and I'm certainly not the first person to say it, and never would be the last. But it's how we respond.
Right.
So that's why I love what the answer, or what you just shared there, because it's what can we do to help shatter some of that and not let it hold us back. Are there things that you that when you work with people now that or in the past where you say this is a great mindset to take into your work that you do, and not that work's the only part. I happen to focus a lot on that, but how can people take who they are into their careers, whether they work for a big company in an office, or they're a solo entrepreneur, or work for a small business, or whatever it might be? How can they bring that? Like, don't you think it would be healthy to bring that mindset of sharing who you are into, do you share that with people that you work with?
Yeah, I share that. I share all the time with the people who I work with, and it doesn't have to be some really extremely long conversations about how we grew up, but just to take the step to be vulnerable for a second, and say, or invite somebody to your community, or to what you do, just talking about even what you ate, what kind of cultural dish you ate, or what type of values that you are important to you. Just having dialogue, I think that's really where it starts, and also making suggestions to our organizations on maybe a different a potluck, a cultural potluck, where people are bringing in different dishes, and just having a group dialogue surrounding who we are and who we want to be, and what parts of ourselves that we value and that we're willing to bring to the table.
Yeah.
Creating that conversation in the organizations we work with.
I was just talking to a good friend of mine in the last day about the importance. We're talking about relationships at work, and we were talking, on the easy topic of the day right now is you walk into a meeting, everybody's on their phone. And they're not looking at each other in the eye, and they're not sharing experiences. But so regardless of your background, but it's so healthy to do that, because we as people thrive on relationships.
Right.
And I think it would just be a lot healthier for the organization and for each individual to focus a little bit more, and then in the process they can bring some of what you're talking about out, right? Hey, this is who I am, this is where I'm from. Empathy and getting to know people really helps a culture, right?
100%. Sharing, just taking that second to be vulnerable, and I feel like that's the tough part, right? That's the difficulty, because I feel like in the culture, the popular culture we're living in right now, I feel like that vulnerability is not something that we fully embrace. We're often really scared, and we lead our lives in a place of fear sometimes, and not from a authentic place of, I'm going to really be fully who I am, and have self-trust, and know I'm going to be able to handle the outcome regardless, right? I'm going to put my foot forward, and I'm going to talk about, the things that are important to me, and have a level of self-trust to know that whatever the outcome is, I can handle it, right? And I have the trust that I know what, we're smart, we know what our environment needs, to bring those things to light, and know that sometimes there are, we don't know what's always the outcome, but trusting that we can handle it regardless.
And it's a little frustrating too, because and thank you for such good insight and thought on that. Is I think that's across the board. I mean, I last worked for a big. My last employer was a big, large Fortune 10 company, and it didn't. I don't blame the employer for this 100%, but there is a lack of people wanting to be vulnerable. And by vulnerable, when I say vulnerable, I don't mean we all hug and cry and get emotional. Sometimes emotion's good, but I mean more of, it's okay to say, hey, I don't know the answer. It's okay to go to your boss or go to other coworkers and say, you know what, I need help. Like, people, when they do that, they're afraid to your point, because they don't want to be vulnerable and expose themselves in that way. And I think we need to have environments and cultures where people feel safe doing those things, just like they need to feel safe to be who they are.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't usually typically like to, I feel like a big buzzword we use is like a safe space, right? I never fully believe we have safe spaces because we never know the outcome. Like I said, like we don't know. But for a organization or a culture to encourage a brave space, right?
Like
not necessarily saying this is safe, because it's not always safe. You don't know, but still encouraging people to be brave and empowering people to be able to say, like, listen, we value you. We want, organizations say we want to hear from you authentically, right? And then the step for people to take the step forward to do that.
I love it. That might be, we'll probably get more great wisdom out of you in the next few minutes, but that might be the golden nugget of this conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Promote, enable, and empower places where to encourage people to be brave.
Right.
Like, be who you are and speak up when you need to. I mean, obviously, always professionally and appropriately, but yeah, we need more of that. And let me just I want you to run with this. So, and I said it already once about personal responsibility. And so just like you want to foster an environment of being brave, I want to encourage people, like, just own it, own it, own it. And I know life's hard, very hard, and I know life sucks sometimes with all the crap it throws at us.
Yeah.
But if you own it, one of the things I say is when you're in that proactive mindset of owning it, you're looking for solutions. When you're playing victim, you're making excuses.
Right.
Own it. I'm going to find solutions and make things better. When I'm the victim, I'm making excuses. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know what? Before I even answer this question, I'm going to tee off with kind of something that I've me and my family have gone through recently. I lost my brother to murder. My brother was killed in Boston, and this has been something that's been really hard for me and my family to go through, to balance work and to balance living. Even getting up in the morning sometimes is tough, right? But like you said, like, no matter what we go through, we always have personal choice, right? We always have the ability to respond, and it is hard to get up every day sometimes, but every day is a chance for ourselves to enroll ourselves to be our best selves, right? Like, I know that personally, I'm not gonna be, like, wake up in a happy-go-lucky mood, ready to tackle the day every day. That's unrealistic. Sometimes I think that's what we wish for, right? And I don't think that's what it's about. I think it's about saying, okay, like, how am I gonna commit to how I'm gonna be in the world? How do I commit personally to choose a state of joy and inspiration, right? And do my best to put my best foot forward, and try to live that way regardless. And I'm not saying to compartmentalize the other things that we're going through, but to understand that life's a wave. We're all on this wave, right? We're on this wave, these ebbs and flows, right? And just to be in grace and not to judge ourselves where we are in this wave, if we're on a high or a low, but to understand that it all serves. These highs serve and these low serves, right? And, like, we still have the ability to choose how we're gonna be at every moment of the day. And every day we wake up, we have the opportunity to put that our best foot forward. So, it's been extremely hard for me to deal with, these things I'm going through in my personal life, and I still realize that I have a responsibility to the world, right? I have a responsibility to inspire. I have that responsibility to put my best forward, because life, if I learned anything from this situation, is like, life is short, and that we just have to live our fullest every day. we have a responsibility to the world and to the people we care about, and how we hold those commitments regardless.
Shake my hand for 1 minute.
Yeah,
That was one of the best things. Thank you for sharing that in around such a tough topic.
Yeah.
I could never say anything like that better myself, and I love that. What I just took from what you said, and I want to peel that away a little bit more if you don't mind, no matter how hard things get, no matter how bad or good,
Yeah.
when you wake up in the morning, it's still on us. We still have the responsibility to go out and uphold our end of the bargain.
Right.
What, if you don't mind, with what's going on with what happened with your brother, how do you channel some of that? How do you channel, and I already know some by everything you just shared in the last 20 minutes. You're doing great things, great work, but, when you lose a sibling, it's so personal.
Yeah.
It's such a close loss. Like, how do you channel some of that emotion or the feeling that you have? Because you got to allow it, right?
Yeah.
When I lost a family member, people very close to me, mentors, a coach said, allow all that emotion to come out. How do you allow your emotion?
Right.
What do you do?
I mean, a part of my personal enrollment, in choosing to live my best personal self is to understand that I'm just a small piece of the story to whatever is around us, right? So it's like, being vulnerable in my workspace and say, listen guys, today I'm feeling really down because of what I've gone through in my life, and I would appreciate the support today, and sharing that with my team, my tribe, the people who care about me. I had the opportunity to do this great true self-leadership program where I had a group of people who, were in community surrounding self-growth. And, it was not easy to always share these things, right? Like, when they're so heavy and we don't understand, if we don't know we're always going to be understood, especially, right? But like I said, how do we expect others to see and understand us if we don't show ourselves?
Right.
Right? So just, not trying to hide it down, just to let whatever I'm feeling move through me, and looking to understand what the world needs in the moment and what I need in the moment, and just act on that.
A lot of us were wired to be, we're afraid of being judged.
Yeah.
To be more specific, we're afraid of being judged negatively, harshly. Do you think that's why people bottle a lot of that up? I mean, I know some of my opinion on it, but what's your, like, why you're a little bit of an anomaly in some ways with this, being so comfortable with sharing and being your true self, but how come so many of us struggle with that? What's your take in your 23, 24 years of building all this wisdom, why do we struggle with that so much? Other than the way our brains are wired. We know our brains are wired to run from fear, but why can't we open up more?
Yeah, I mean, something that, I talk about in the work I do is that, this is based on, some psychoanalytic theory that, we're born into the world, we're born into our essence, right, where we are our fullest selves, and as kids, sometimes we're not always afraid to be vulnerable. Kids are vulnerable all the time. They do this so beautifully, right? To be able to be vulnerable and share. But as life goes on, we get these wounds, right? We are judged by people, right? And people say that we are not good enough, or that there's parts of ourselves that we shouldn't show. We learn this from the media. We learn this from even people we care about. All these wounds we experience, and as time passes, we kind of learn to put masks over these wounds and say, okay, like, I need to be a man. I got to put this hyper masculinity mask on right now, right? And I can never take this off, right? But we're born into this world as a whole, as a universe, all these parts of ourselves. So, that's the reason why I think we get these wounds throughout life, and we need to build these masks to protect ourselves at certain time periods, right? Like, it's just important. But we don't always have to wear this mask, right? We can choose, maybe one time it served to be a certain way, right? And to be afraid of judgment, but maybe now it doesn't. Maybe at one point we had to leave a certain part of ourselves, in a place that we felt like we couldn't express it, but that was then, and now we still have another day to choose how we're going to be in the world. Like I said, you know what I mean? So, we don't always have to continue to wear these masks. We can choose to put on our mask or to take them off, or like I said, the defense mechanisms. Like I like to say often, like we use walls a lot to talk about defense mechanisms, but and the goal is not to like take down these walls, but it's to put a door in the wall to decide when I'm gonna let people in, I'm gonna let myself to be seen, and then choose. Sometimes I'm gonna close the door in this wall.
What's one of the reasons you've worn a mask before? What's something that's been, I know what mine are. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that I for years, and I've said this on some lives and podcasts before, I definitely went through a long stretch of my life where I worried what people thought of me. That simple. Mm-hmm. Not looks, not how I performed in my job so much. It was always just a general feeling of, I want people to like me. Mm-hmm. And thankfully I've been able to work through most of that. I still have some of it. I don't know if it'll ever all go away, but I wanted people to like me. Yeah. What's one of the things that caused you to put on a different mask from time to time in your life?
I think that, I struggle with something similar to that too. I think we all, want a sense of belonging, right? And we want to be liked because as natural as people, people are pack animals. We're born to be a part of community, so naturally, instinctually, it's, it makes sense that we want to be liked and wants to fit in, because if we had to live in complete silo from the community, we wouldn't survive, mm-hmm. right? So it makes sense that we feel this way, right? And I definitely dealt with that too, and definitely, hyper masculinity is definitely a big, mask I've worn, is to like, be really stoic and not to be able mm-hmm. to like, be vulnerable or be expressive, right? But it's important that we give ourselves the space to be able to be, ourselves fully still, and understand that not everyone's gonna like us, right? And that's okay, you know what I mean? Because like, we have people who do like us, right? And we have people who do value us, and even more important than that, we can choose to love and like ourselves, and the only way we can create that self-love and that self-acceptance is saying, I'm gonna be who I am gonna be regardless, and it does, and I can handle the outcome. You know mm-hmm. what I mean? That's the only way we create that, right? It's just to be ourselves fully, and know that, not everyone's gonna like us, but listen, like, I love myself still, and I'm putting my best forward, my best foot forward regardless. That's the only way we can create that in our lives, in my imagination at least.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you think that if, as long as somebody loves himself unconditionally, life's always going to have road bumps and potholes and all that, but I mean, as long as you do that, is that like a bedrock? It sounds like from all the things I'm hearing from you, that's one of your core guiding principles in life. If you do that, no matter what life throws at you, you're going to be okay.
For sure. Because, you can handle it. You know what I mean? Like, we can, because we are built to endure struggle as human mm-hmm. beings. We're built to endure struggle. We're built to handle isolation. We can handle all these things that's thrown at us, right? We have a fear that we won't be able to, right? And I think that living in that place of fear, that like we are unacceptable, we won't be able to handle something, that is really what prevents us from reaching our goals and mm-hmm. doing what we need to do for ourselves to move forward and to handle the things we need to handle.
Yeah. Some of those things, those limiting beliefs and stories
right.
that we tell, that they cripple us.
They cripple us.
Yeah, and that's and again, it's so fitting for this broadcast, podcast, all of it above, is that you know, we all want to help people get through some of those things that just paralyze us,
Right.
because we're so full of. I used to talk. I just did a video about a week ago where one of the stories I said was, I'm not an entrepreneur. I can't start my own initiative business, undertaking it all. And I told myself that for a long time, and yet here I am creating something with the help of so many awesome people.
Right.
But it crippled me for a while.
Right.
And now I believe my journey and path went where it was supposed to, and I'm now doing it at the right time. But my bigger point is, if I kept telling myself that, I would never have gone out and done it.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
So let's segue into your future a little bit then. Let's spend the last few minutes talking. So what are some of the things, I think you've given everybody a really good flavor of who you are as a person and some of the things that you live by. And what are some of the things you want to accomplish, whether it's short or long term? We know you want to help people.
Yeah.
What are some things you see coming up in your future to help them?
Yeah, so really two main ways. One way I want to, put my impact in the world is with continuing to do this diversity and inclusion work. So, I do some of this work now, and as I continue to grow, I want to, develop my own business in diversity and inclusion and get my PhD in organizational psychology and being able to go to different organizations and help them structure their culture so it's inclusive. Mm-hmm. And I want to do a lot of research in what it really looks like to be inclusive and how we can measure. We're in a culture now that is really, revolves around metrics and being able to quantify
Mm-hmm.
things. So how we can quantify these things. I want to, own my own, consultancy, doing that work.
Sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but before I forget, is it hard to get the ears to get into an organization on that topic? And I know you're new at this,
Mm-hmm.
so, and that's just calling it as it is.
Right.
In 10 years, you
Right.
might have, 50 companies you worked with, but is it hard in today's world, do you think, to get people to come to the table about that topic and make that, because I look at it no different than not all companies are always people focused. They're results focused and making
Right.
money, which I'm all for companies making money, ethically of course, but they don't always put people first.
Yeah.
So how do you get this to the forefront and let
Right.
people know this is really important that we do that?
Yeah, I mean, it all, it depends on who the company is, and I think at our core, we all want to be an organization that run great and that we're happy at, right? The question for me usually is, why do we forget that? What is it, right? What is it that is keeping us, shielding our eyes from really what's going on? That living in a place of fantasy, these things don't matter, right? And I feel like once I get people in a room and create a container, right, to have these difficult conversations, I think that's really what's important, is creating spaces in which we can just be real and say, listen, the way that you interacted with me today offended me and it impacted my ability to work, right? And, we can have a better relationship if, we have lines in which we both feel understood and valued as people, and let's create that for us, between each other, right? So what I do is I go into companies and help them facilitate these conversations around who they want to be, what their mission is, and how diversity and inclusion fits within that mission, and how we're going to include everyone in this mission, and change the way we are being in the spaces we're in, so people can be happy and be productive and growth oriented in the situation that they're in, and we don't have to live in this limited diversity of thought, right? We can live here. We can live here in the way we're including people in our ideas.
Can we get better at I'm following everything you're saying, and I think it's great. And those discussions need. You and I talked one time about having the hard conversations.
Yes, for sure. We had a hard conversation.
We did.
Ourselves. We did.
Yeah. And you know what we should do is we should have a part 2 to this.
Yeah.
In a few months, and we can bring some of that conversation. I think that would be really good exploring that.
Definitely.
I'm enjoying too much, getting to know you more in this conversation.
Yeah.
But in the future, let's do that. But. You don't owe me anything. I'm not saying make me a promise, but you know what I would love to see happen, and you're in a great position with this work you want to do. I would like to see, and this is my observation, and everybody listening more.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and one of the reasons, when I first set out to, before I did career fulfillment, I started general leadership and how to become better leaders of ourselves. And one of the reasons I was motivated to do that was because I was watching from afar on social media and on TV and other mediums that so many people were judgmental and critical and sharing their thoughts, but not listening in return.
Yeah.
Do you think we can all get better at listening? Because I don't think what you want to do, and which I think is great, but it's only going to really work if we're all listening to each other.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. We need to, I mean, a part of vulnerability is listening, right? It's vulnerable to listen deeply to somebody because we might hear something we don't want to hear. We might have a question that's asked of us that we don't want to answer,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know the answer to, right? So it's like I'll always continue to say this, is just putting our best foot forward and understanding, like, we're in service to something greater. We're in service to our families. We're in service to the organizations we're working for. We're not just individuals. And that's the reason why I think it's important to listen is also because, like, not only for our individual benefit, but we're in service to what's bigger. So if we're not listening to each other and not giving each other space to understand what's really going on, we are not going to create cultures around us that thrive. It just doesn't happen if we don't know what's going on, if we don't know what experiences other people are having.
That's a big key right there, is that empathy of knowing what other people are going through.
Yeah.
So absolutely kudos to that. So I kind of interrupted you.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about getting the right people to the table to have these conversations. After I asked you about what's in your future. So anything you want to add or finish there, and anything else? What else you have coming down the pike for all this great work you're doing?
Yeah, and then so diversity and inclusion. I would love to. My aspirations are just to get my PhD and to continue to do this work on a broader scale. And then on the other side of it, I want to help people with personal growth and living their best life. So really, I want to work in communities like underprivileged, as we say, the communities I grew up in, were marginalized communities, and how people in these communities can live their best life and really work through some serious problems and internalized depression and how people can put their best foot forward and get the skills on how to set goals and envision and live their fullest potential. Understand that we're a universe, we're a whole, and how we can utilize all these different pieces. I want to facilitate workshops doing that.
That's incredible. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I know you're going to do really well and be successful. That's not hard to spot. And I'll tell you what, if I was somebody out there and saw and listened to this, and I would knock on your door. Like, hey man, how can I get you involved in my organization, or bring some of your work to what we're doing too? I think you have a lot of great things to offer.
I appreciate it. I'm trying, and I think that we all have our mission, right? We all go through get these wounds, and there's definitely I grew up with one thing about me is I grew up with learning disabilities, and didn't really learn how to, for example, read until I was in 7th grade, which is really late for the community that I went to school in. But I was really down on myself in those things, but I always knew that I was on this earth for a reason, right? Like, I'm here on this planet for a reason. like we all are, and I stay connected and grounded in that. No matter how high my highs get, or no matter how lows my lows get, I understand I'm in service to what's greater.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's really that's something that really drives me, is to understand that, you know, there's a lot of work to be done. You know, there's a lot of work to be done in this world we're living in. And if we stop, you know, just focusing on just ourselves, we got to focus on ourselves, but stop focusing on just ourselves and understand we're in service to what's bigger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like that's how we're really that's how what leads to personal success. That living in service, and being connected to what's greater. So yeah, that's how that I stay connected to.
That's phenomenal.
So,
If anybody wants to check you out or look you up online, is there anywhere in particular you want people to find you, or what do you say to that?
So you know, you can add me at Facebook at Lawrence Jaquan Stevenson. My email is lstevenson.j@gmail.com. You can send a link to the video. And my Instagram, Motivation is Law, and I post, you know, some of my artwork. I do some art as well, and you know, I love photography and capturing energies. I love to focus on energy, and follow me there. Yeah, I have Motivation is Law is my Instagram.
I like it. That's Instagram too?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, you've been a pleasure to talk with and really just listen to. I appreciate it, and thanks for your time and sharing what I think is really like kind of another level of a lot of the things that we need to think about outside of all the, for a lot of people who have a job with a lot of responsibilities, just as one example, we get caught up in that. And I think that you hit on so many great things that we just, it's easy to lose sight of, but we have to try really hard not to, because it's really important.
Yeah.
So thanks for bringing that all to our attention.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for, you know, bringing light into the world as well, and creating spaces in which, you know, we gotta mobilize, we gotta come together, and really focus on, you know, this world we're trying to create. So, you know, thank you as well for having me and doing all that you do.
Oh, you're welcome, and we'll do more together.
Yeah, for
we
sure.
will do more together. Yeah. So thank you very much. And hey, listen, for those of you who are still tuned in or checking this out later on the Facebook Live, thanks for an amazing podcast. You just watched and listened to as Lawrence and I recorded a podcast, but this was equally fulfilling just to know that we can get it out there in real time to some people who are watching. We will definitely share this. We'll go into the comments, and Carvin and a few others, Carvin in particular had several questions and some feedback. So let's make sure we both check those out later.
Yes.
And Carvin, thank you, and everybody else, Jillian, Alex, Donnie, some of the other people I saw. And, you know, I would just leave you with this too. You know, I talk so much about, you know, we're here to help people create the fulfillment that we all deserve in our work and our life. And, you know, look into and think about some of the things that Lauren said today. Think about some of the things along the lines of, you know, all inclusion is an easy word at the surface, but what does it really mean underneath? And because to me, it's also how we look at ourselves, which you did a great job walking us through, and listening to and understanding other people. You can't have inclusion if we're not loving ourselves and projecting that out to other people.
Right, and celebrating those things. You know, celebrating those things.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank y'all.
All right, see y'all soon. Thanks, bye.